Some names don't just appear on the screen, they redefine it. They weren't just actors, they were eras in themselves. Men whose eyes spoke more than their lines, whose silence shook theaters, and whose presence lit up the silver screen. From the rugged to the romantic, from rebels to rulers, they brought every shade of masculinity to life and turned it into timeless legend. This is not just cinema history. This is the story of the men who became myth. Welcome to Timeless Legends, where greatness never fades. Sometimes a single role doesn't just change an actor's fate, it defines an entire decade. And that's exactly what happened when John Travolta played Tony Manero in Saturday Night Fever in 1977. A young man who rose from the streets of Brooklyn to become the king of the dance floor. His rhythmic steps, his confident gaze, this wasn't just a character. It became the face of the 1970s. And then, just a year later in 1978, he returned. But this time as Danny Zuko, the charming, leather-jacketed heartthrob from Grease. His smile, his style, his voice, all of it didn't just make him a superstar. It turned him into a complete cultural phenomenon. John Travolta wasn't just an actor. He was a dream of a generation, a symbol of style, and the shining star of the 70s. And the question remains, could anyone be more of a 70s icon than John Travolta? Probably not. Because whether it was the dance floor or high school, John Travolta ruled them all. They say some people don't wait for time. They become time itself, and Al Pacino is one such name. From 1972 to 1974, in just 2 years, Al Pacino achieved what takes others a lifetime. First, The Godfather, then Serpico. And then The Godfather Part 2, one after another. Films that didn't just shake Hollywood, they turned Al Pacino into a symbol of pure artistry. At just 34 years old, he had already received 3 Oscar nominations. Think about it. A young man with fire in his eyes, truth in his voice, and a performance so powerful, it could make silence speak. Whether it was Michael Corleone in The Godfather, or the honest cop fighting the system in Serpico. Every scene, every moment. Al Pacino didn't just act, he lived it. He wasn't performing. He was creating an era. And so, at just 34 years of age, Al Pacino had already become a legend. Actors work in films, and some actors bring films to life. Marlon Brando, a name that didn't just redefine acting, but ruled an entire decade. 1972, The Godfather, a film that changed the course of cinema history. And with it came Don Vito Corleone. Brando's voice, his presence, his dignity, it felt as if Hollywood had finally found its god. That same year, he appeared in Last Tango in Paris, a role that shattered every boundary of boldness and emotion. Then in 1976 came The Missouri Breaks, a strange, rebellious, unpredictable character, one that only Marlon Brando could portray with such grace and depth. In 1978, Superman. As Jor-El, Superman's father, he won the hearts of a whole new generation. And finally, 1979, Apocalypse Now, a terrifying, mysterious, and overwhelmingly powerful performance. That still leaves audiences in awe. These weren't just films, they were the peak of cinematic art, and Marlon Brando was a living legend. In the 1970s, while Hollywood was basking in its golden age, Marlon Brando wore its crown. An era of cinema where romance, drama, and adventure reigned supreme. And into this decade stepped a man whose single kick, a single punch, was enough to shake the entire screen. A name, a force, a legend, a quiet man, master of martial arts. When he appeared before the camera, the world discovered what a real tough guy truly looked like. Whether it was facing off against Bruce Lee in Way of the Dragon, or standing as the lone hero in his own films, Chuck Norris always arrived as an unstoppable force. And the most fascinating part? It wasn't just men who admired him. Even women found themselves drawn to his calm smile and steel-like presence. And today, 50 years have passed, yet Chuck Norris still stands just as strong, just as determined, just as unbeatable as ever. Is he someone who has defeated time itself? Or is it just good genes, Chuck? Whatever it is, Chuck Norris is a name that hasn't faded with time. It's only become more legendary. From 1972 to 1973, just 2 years and 4 films that became massive hits in every sense. The Candidate, a restless truth in the world of politics, with Robert Redford portraying a character that reflected society like a mirror. Jeremiah Johnson, a tale of solitude, nature, and survival, where he transformed into a man who had become one with the wilderness. The Way We Were, a film of love and aching memories, where Robert's silence spoke volumes through his eyes. And then came The Sting, a clever, charming, and magical performance that stunned not only audiences but critics alike. 2 years, 4 blockbuster films, and that unforgettable face. So beautiful, it almost felt like a myth. Robert Redford wasn't just an actor, he was a living dream, a walking, breathing poem on screen. An icon of the 1970s who embodied style, intelligence, and sensitivity, all at once. Paul Newman. To many, the most handsome man in Hollywood history. But his beauty wasn't just in his face. There was a calm depth in his eyes and a quiet confidence in his presence that made every scene feel special. And when Paul Newman's friendship and chemistry joined forces with a star like Robert Redford, it wasn't just acting anymore, it became something unforgettable. In 1969 came Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, a Western at heart, but truly a timeless story of friendship. Then in 1973, that same magic returned, in the form of The Sting, a blend of wit, style, and laughter that still enchants audiences today. These weren't just films. They were a bond between 2 actors that redefined on-screen camaraderie. Paul Newman, not just a legend, but a companion, an artist, who brought grace and charm to Hollywood. In the 1970s, if there was one name that was pure gold, it was Clint Eastwood. 1970 gave us 2 Mules for Sister Sarah, a Western where even the silence of a gunslinger thundered on screen. Then came 1971's Dirty Harry, where he played the cop who blurred the line between law and justice. Do you feel lucky, punk? It wasn't just a line, it was a cultural explosion, a moment that made Clint Eastwood the symbol of style and toughness. And by the end of the decade came Escape from Alcatraz, 1979. Silent resistance, ruthless intelligence, and an escape from a prison deemed impossible, until Clint Eastwood made it possible. These weren't just movies, they were an attitude, a persona, something only Clint Eastwood could bring to life. Over 50 years later, and he still stands, exactly where legends are meant to be. He began his film journey in 1961 with Angel Baby, but the real explosion came in the 1970s when he emerged as a full-fledged superstar. In 1972 came Deliverance, a serious, dark, and psychologically jarring film where Burt proved the true depth of his acting. Then came 1974's The Longest Yard, a prison, a football team, and a rebellion. Here, Burt Reynolds wasn't just a hero, he became a symbol of wit and resistance. And in 1977, Smokey and the Bandit. This wasn't just a film, it was a cultural phenomenon. Burt's smile, his car chases, that free-spirited energy, all of it made him the people's favorite. In the 70s, he was both charming and fearless, a face that dominated the screen and a name that lived in people's hearts. Hollywood's eternally charming face. And that smile, a smile that held 1,000 untold stories. In the 1970s, he reached the peak of his stardom, where his personality, talent, and allure all began to shine at once. In 1975 came Shampoo. He played a hairdresser, but not just any hairdresser, one who became the embodiment of beauty, humor, and desire. Then in 1978 came Heaven Can Wait, a film that blended emotion, spirituality, and comedy so beautifully, and Warren Beatty was nothing short of brilliant in it. But the films were just one part of the story. The real secret to his fame? That irresistible smile, and those 1001 legendary romances that turned him into a true symbol of romance. Warren Beatty wasn't just an actor, he was the fantasy of the 1970s, a face untouched by time. The end of the 1960s, and a role forever etched in cinematic history, Midnight Cowboy, 1969. Alongside Dustin Hoffman, Jon Voight delivered a stunning performance that instantly placed him among the ranks of serious actors. Then came the start of the 1970s, and Jon Voight's journey continued, now deeper, quieter, and even more powerful. Deliverance, 1972. A film that was not just about adventure, but a harrowing battle of human psychology and survival. And in it, Jon Voight emerged as the silent hero. Then in 1978, Coming Home. The story of a wounded soldier returning from the Vietnam War. And Jon Voight didn't just play the role. He pulled audiences deep into the core of human emotion. And finally came The Champ, 1979. A father, a son, and the pain of separation. An ending so powerful, it brought millions to tears. Jon Voight didn't just act, he became a soul on screen. In the 1970s, he was an artist who not only broke the boundaries of performance, but left a lasting impression on every heart that watched him. James Caan. In 1972, The Godfather hit the screen. And with it came a character that shook every brick of the film's foundation. Sonny Corleone. Fierce, uncontrollable, dangerous. James Caan played the role with such raw intensity that audiences didn't just watch, they felt his fury. This was the role that catapulted James Caan to overnight stardom. Then in 1975 came Rollerball, a brutal, terrifying, futuristic sport, a battlefield of power, control, and rebellion. In this film, James Caan didn't just show physical strength, he revealed the emotional depth of his craft, proving he wasn't just a man of rage, but a commanding presence on screen. In the 1970s, James Caan wasn't just an actor. He was a blazing star in a powder keg, transformed into a true icon by his strength, his passion, and his defiance. In 1971 came The French Connection, a relentless, stubborn, and obsessed cop. The role of Popeye Doyle, a character that became immortal in the history of cinema and acting. Then in 1972, The Poseidon Adventure, a story of hope, sacrifice, and leadership aboard a sinking ship. And Gene Hackman stood at the very center of it all, captivating every viewer with his commanding presence. These were the films that set Gene Hackman on his iconic journey through Hollywood. In 1978 came Superman, and he became Lex Luthor, a villain crafted with intelligence, sarcasm, and undeniable charm. Whether hero or villain, Gene Hackman had one rare gift. He brought every character to life. An actor who won every major award in his career, and yet always carried himself with humility, depth, and grace. Gene Hackman, a name etched not just on the screen, but in the hearts of all who watched him. A face so captivating, the world seemed to stop when he appeared. A son of France, but a man who stole hearts across the globe. Whether wielding Zorro's sword or channeling the rebellious charm of the Black Tulip, this was a face that carried danger, allure, and a silent defiance. Then came that moment, when Alain Delon was no longer just a symbol of beauty, but a true legend of cinema. The 1970s, a time when his star burned at its brightest. This was an era where he didn't just act, he embodied romance, strength, and emotional depth. It was Alain Delon who made even a historical figure like Julius Caesar feel timeless in his own unforgettable way. In every role, there was a quiet intensity, an elegant dignity, and an undeniable magnetism. Alain Delon wasn't just an actor. He was the very definition of beauty, a cinematic masterpiece of the 1970s. Robert De Niro. In 1974 came The Godfather Part 2. And this time, the role of young Vito Corleone was taken on by an actor who not only carried the legacy of Marlon Brando, but brought it to life in his own unforgettable way. That role transformed Robert De Niro into a force of talent, and it earned him an Academy Award. But as an artist, his true identity was sealed in 1976, when Taxi Driver changed the face of cinema forever. Travis Bickle, lonely, wounded, disconnected from the world, a man hiding a storm within. You talking to me? It wasn't just a line from a script, it became the very language of cinema. De Niro painted that character with such raw intensity that you didn't just watch him. You felt his pain, his madness, his isolation. In the 1970s, Robert De Niro became the actor who made his characters more real than reality itself. He wasn't just a part of cinema, he was a movement in art. If you felt the power, the elegance, and the brilliance of these iconic stars, like, share, and subscribe to Timeless Legends, because we don't just revisit history, we celebrate legends.